Hi, friends. Logan Clements here with another episode of the Better Events podcast. This week, we are answering your questions. Yes, you are listeners. We're doing this as our kind of mailbag where we're going to answer a little bit of everything since we always get these emails or messages on LinkedIn from you guys with just some one-off questions that while we could totally delve in and have, a whole episode about some of these, we figured if we lump them all together, we can get through more of your questions. So Mary and I are talking about everything from your questions about how do you shake up that traditional dinner? How do you manage week-long or multi-day events with your event team? Talking about working with different vendors and clients, pitching vendors for business collaborations, and much, much more. So, if you're someone who sent us a question, you might hear your question answered in this episode. And this is also, if you haven't sent us your questions yet, feel free to do so at our email at bettereventspod@gmail.com, or you can message us on Instagram or send Mary and I a DM on LinkedIn.
Welcome to the Better Events Podcast. Join two event strategists, Logan Clements and Mary Davidson, who believe we can all create, host, and attend better events. In this podcast, you will learn about event strategy and actions that you can use today as an event host, planner, or manager. Hear directly from the people who are creating innovative and inspiring events today and tomorrow, and grow your business along the way. Now, let's get started, and thanks for listening to the Better Events Podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Better Events Podcast this week. We are thrilled to be with you, and this conversation is going to be a fun one. We do these occasionally, but as Logan introduced at the beginning of this episode, we are doing our listener mailbag where we answer a bunch of questions that you all have sent in over time. And this time we're going to do it just a little bit differently. But before we get into that, I want to give a little shout out to one of our listeners, Sharon. Sharon, thank you so much for leaving us a kind review on Apple Podcasts. Sharon shared, I'm loving all the various topics that Mary and Logan cover, all related to events, social media, niching, budgets, costs. Love learning how to create better experiences by listening to better events with this super duo. Thank you so much, Sharon, for that awesome review. And if you would like to leave us a review, we'd love to invite you to do so. Give us 5 stars if you would on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. We love to see those reviews come through, and they really help us out. So thank you so much. So now we're going to get into why we chose this topic, and Logan is going to share a little bit about that.
Thanks, Mary. Yeah, so a little bit about why we wanted to do this mailbag would be we love hearing from you listeners. We joke that podcasting can be lonely, and this is one of those things when we get those questions, those emails from you, it makes the whole process feel just a little more friendly and communal. I know one of my favorite things about the podcast is this community that we've been building. We got to see some of you at our Better Events conference back in December last year, and save the date soon. We will be announcing for this year. It is coming back in December. And so I think this touch point with you guys of doing a mailbag of all of your questions that we've gotten. And I guess when I say all, we aren't able to get to every single one of these questions, but we've picked a couple of them that feel relevant to the community altogether. And we just love to check in and see what are top of mind for you guys. So without further ado, let's get into your questions. I have our first question here, and this comes from Cassidy, who sent us an email just kind of asking us to talk. Can we talk a little bit about how we manage and have best practices for week-long events, like strategies for keeping the program together or separate? How do you keep your momentum going, and how do you manage committees? Whew. So Cassidy, this is a great question. You're going to hear me say that a lot. I think everybody's questions are valid. My favorite thing about events and my advice to event pros is always to ask questions. So congratulations, you're asking questions. Week-long events are their own beast, I would say. I always joke because I do a lot with sports that are multi-week, that are 3-week events, 2-week events, longer than that. I just had that 6-week event in Chile. And you really do have to describe it like a marathon. So just like a marathon runner who does training to make it so that they can get through the long marathon they're running, you as the event pro need to plan for that. So when you're doing a week-long event, I think there's different strategies for keeping them together or separate from like a programmatic standpoint. For example, if you are trying to make sure that everybody comes to every one of your events, doing a multi-day conference or a week-long conference, it's easier to fly or have people travel and be there all week versus if you're doing a series of receptions or pop-ups or things like that. I do find sometimes it can cannibalize each other, meaning you're going to lose folks are going to just not show up towards the end of whatever amount of time you have because they lose the momentum and they get tired. And so just make sure there's intention behind it. Like the multi-week events I do, with the Olympics or the US Open with tennis, these are multi-week events that gain momentum because the earlier events are the preliminary rounds, the early rounds. And as time goes on, the competition only gets fiercer because athletes are getting eliminated, and it culminates at the end with the championship matches or the gold medal matches. And so that's where you're going to have crescendo. Sports naturally has that with its with how it's scripted. For your events, you would want to make sure that you're also crescendoing into something from a program perspective and making sure that you're not burning people out at the start because you want them to be with you for the long haul. So that's for the program piece. But you have an interesting piece of this question about managing your committees and keeping the momentum up all week with your staff. And this is something that I think it's really important to think about is when you're planning an event that is longer than a day, you really need to get specific with the hours and the how long your event staff is going to be on site. This is something I see a lot with my production, events that I do where I come in as a producer and I'm putting together the production schedule. It is very often that when we say a day, we mean 10 hours. And anything over 10 hours would be overtime. That usually is until overtime is defined as 1.5 times your hourly rate. And that's usually until 12 hours. Anything over 12 hours turns into double time. So 2 times your regular rate. And you can see here, this is how it can add up quickly and get expensive. And when I first came into these, I feel like came across this method. I think I balked at it. I was like, oh, wow, that can really add up. And why would they do that? Like it can just get expensive so quick. For example, an event from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. or having staff there 8 to 8, you're like, that's not that long of a day, but that'd be 12 hours. So 10 hours of regular time and 2 hours of overtime. But the longer I've been in this industry, the more I've realized that it's really just the human first approach. And so compensating folks for overtime. I think if you're doing a long event, you need to make sure you factor that in and don't just pay them a solid day rate that is could be any amount of hours unless you're counting overtime automatically into that rate and it's already generous. And then if you only need them to stay for a couple hours, then that's fine. So budget for overtime, make sure you're compensating your team well, and think about when you can take breaks or even split shifts. That's something I just recently did for an event that was only a 1-day event, but it was really long. We had to load in the same day. So our call time was like 5:30 or 6 in the morning, and it would go until 8 o'clock at night. And I had a hard time with volunteers and people no showing. And so this past year, we tried a split shift. So we had one shift that started at 6 a.m. and they'd be done by 1. And then they just turned into regular attendees after that. And then a second shift that was from 1 to 8. And I just had to, I controlled that I need a lot more people for setup than I do in the afternoon. But that was a nice way to get a little bit clearer with volunteers about what the ask was, help them enjoy the event after they're done. And it accommodated some folks who couldn't make that super early call time, but still wanted to volunteer. So just really think about what you're doing. And then I always love a surprise and delight. If you know this podcast, I love like little things like surprising people with coffee or donuts or an afternoon snack, or if it's really hot and you're doing an outside event, ice cream or something. And you can't do that surprise on day 1 because then it becomes an expectation. But say it's a week-long event, 7 days, I tend to see the slump hit you around day 4 or day 3. 3, 4 tends to be, I had another event that was a 2-week-long event, and we joked that day 6 was always the hardest because you were at the end of your first week and getting tired and realizing you had to do it all over again the next week. And that was where we would purposely try to do something to surprise and delight the team. So just have that human first approach. Know if you feel tired, your team probably feels tired, and make sure that you're thinking of their needs, their time, how much sleep they're getting. And that'll just make sure everybody stays fresh.
All right. Another one of our questions came from Enrique, who shared that there is an issue that they were grappling with if people were tiring of traditional sit down gala dinners. But if they did other formats such as reception style events, would that hurt sponsorship fundraising opportunities because corporations expect tables and the opportunity to sit with their colleagues? This is a great question. This was asked, I believe, back in November, so we're finally getting to answer it. So thank you so much for your patience. But we're happy to share about this in this episode. And I specifically am. I have often grappled with the confusion of sponsorship and partnership, especially with events like galas or receptions. And so I would say for this one that what I have seen over time is that sponsors rarely come and actually fulfill their allotted tables that they were given from their sponsorship. And so why are we saving them this table space when they don't even want to attend? That's not the goal that they're or the benefit that they're most excited about from their sponsorship benefit package. So all of that to say is I haven't seen them totally utilizing this benefit, so I don't really know if they would miss it. So something that it seems like is kind of the change in sponsorship and partnership is giving sponsors the opportunity to engage in a different way, such as through an activation or something you're already doing at your event, which you're then turning it into a sponsorship activation opportunity where they can interact with the attendees in a different way. It's not a booth with swag. It's not a traditional benefit package. It may not be a seat at the table unless they would like that. But it's like, sponsoring a wine toss or something like that, but or something just like a little bit more interesting, or sponsoring the photo booth, and when they get the printouts, it has their logo on them, like interesting things like that. So if you changed your event to a reception style event, I don't think that they're missing out on benefits in regards to where they're sitting. I think you can still capture the audience and give the sponsor a benefit regardless of the type of event. It's just how you want to get them in front of the audience, in front of the people. So some sponsors might disagree with that. Those are the folks who maybe you could have a table for them. If you want to do a reception style event, like you could have some tables and some cocktail tables, some, like rounds, and kind of mix it up for those that need a reserved table. But those are the only, you're giving them however many seats that they're actually going to utilize. So I hope that this is making sense. I'm going to stop talking here, but I definitely think that there is a lot of hope in changing an event to a reception style event and still having success with sponsorship. 100%.
Our next question comes from another listener who asked us or said event planning often involves working with diverse vendors and clients. How do you ensure effective communication and maintain strong relationships with all parties involved to deliver a flawless event experience? Whew, this is a great question. And so much of what we do in the event industry, I feel like, is relationship building and relationship management. And this question you're asking is really about maintaining those strong relationships and effective communication. So, you first part I would say is really the effective communication piece. You need to communicate with your vendors. The number of times that I've seen people make assumptions, even with people that they've worked with before, that then have turned out to bite them in the butt, like a DJ writing down the wrong date and you're calling them because they're late day of, and they realize they haven't even left the house because they thought it was tomorrow. So here's where you need to really over communicate. So this isn't harassing your vendors, but more from the get-go, asking them, what do they need from you as the planner or the organizer? What do you need from them? And setting out some milestone deadlines. And this is where a work back schedule is really helpful, where you take your event date and you work backwards from what's due. But just making sure you're asking those questions, and maybe even asking the question, is there anything else that I need to be thinking about for your role, whatever that role is? If it's a caterer, if it's a florist, if it's a production vendor, it's okay for you to not know all the answers, but you need to give them space to tell you these things. I also tend to think talking about both load in and load out is really important for your vendors. A lot of people talk about load in because we're all trying to get in by a certain time, but also talking about load out is really important. And some of those have budgetary implications. So I like to ask those questions from the jump. And then I also really like to put together, I have a workbook that I use for all my internal team or folks I'm working with that is really like my master document of everything that's happening at all times, the run a show, sometimes a work back schedule, crew list, all of that. But just make sure with your vendors, put together kind of like a one pager for them. And that's with your contact information, all this information that you've already worked with them on about what time they're arriving, what's the address where they should be like parking or loading in. Are they calling you? Who on your team are they calling? Put that phone number. Make sure you have their phone number, the schedule for the day, any other like reminders they need. And you can fit all that. You should be able to fit everything into one page. And this is something that I would make sure you always do. It's a good exercise for you as the planner to make sure there's nothing missed. We also know, though, you can create an amazing resource and not everyone's going to use it. So you have to understand that that one pager might not get read. And this is where maybe having a pre-call is always really useful. I don't think I work with any vendors in the last 2 years where I haven't insisted that we do some kind of pre-call to talk through things, especially if you're someone who's worked on this event for weeks, months, you've lived in it. You have thought through all the details, but there's going to be information that to you is just now second, it's just you know it. You know it like the back of your hand, but you might forget to tell somebody who some of these vendors, they're doing like 10 events a week. They're doing multiple events a week. They don't have time to think through some of these things, but you can usually get a hold of them for a 10, 15-minute phone call. Zoom's great as well for a video call and just run through all of that. Another thing I love to do is also try to get their Instagram handles or their social media handles so that you can tag them when you have event photos after the fact or photos you take. People love sharing information. So if you can get their handles and you make sure you tag them, I know some vendors are really good about this. Others, it's kind of an afterthought, but that's a great way to share the love, give them credit, and hopefully then they repost what you're doing. So it just help rise, it rises the tide of all of your vendors. And then lastly, post event, I would make sure you say thank you and make sure you've wrapped up whatever it is you need to do. Most people, they're going to do the invoicing process, but was there any other deliverables that you promised each other? The photos thing I mentioned is a really helpful one. If you have photos, to make sure you send them to each other or send to that vendor if they're allowed to share them. That's always so great. And then I've started doing in my personal post-event process with clients, I say start, I've been doing it, but I forget a lot, is to add a lovely link or two for my business for writing reviews. And so if you really genuinely enjoyed working with a vendor, there's nothing more powerful in that thank you email to them than asking, hey, is there somewhere you'd like me to leave you a quick review about working with you? It was so great. And they're always going to say yes and send you a link. And then you're helping them, they're helping you. That's how you continue to build that relationship. So hopefully that answers your question.
The next question that I am going to answer is a question about how to get started without marketing. Let's see. The listener that asked this question is a marketing professional, and so they know the importance of marketing. It's part of a lot of startup plans. But how do you pitch and talk about your business and brand without having a portfolio or visual tool? All right, this is a great question, and I'm excited to answer this. Logan might have a different opinion, but I'm excited to answer this because I have not really seen the fruits of my labors with marketing, specifically for my events business. So I think that there's a lot of ways that you can get out there, but what I have seen, at least in the industry that I'm interacting with, people are on, social media or things like that to build their credibility within the industry and among their peers, not necessarily for potential clients. You can push back at me on that if you want. It might depend. Like if you're more into weddings, I just am assuming that social might be like way more important to getting clients. But for those of us who are doing kind of like other types of events, the people who follow me are vendors, suppliers, and fellow planners, and maybe occasionally a potential client. So I feel like I'm posting for my credibility to show people that I'm still doing events, that I'm like in the industry, in the community, but I have never gotten a client from like Instagram, for example, at least that I can recall. So I think that there are a lot of ways that you can pitch yourself without having these like traditional, marketing things. I do think a website is always going to make you look more credible no matter what service you're offering for like any type of business. Like if I can Google somebody and they come up, even if they have a LinkedIn and you're just marketing yourself on LinkedIn, that anything I can like tell that they are a real person to me is credible. So whatever that thing may be, it may not be like a heavy marketing thing, but whatever you can grab and kind of like show that you're somewhat credible and like have somewhat of a presence somewhere, I think that's valuable. And you don't have to go the traditional, startup marketing plan to do that. You don't have to spend any money to do that. Well, if you get a website, it might be a little bit. But like one other idea that I have is that you could create some graphic. You could use the free version of Canva and create like a one-page resume, but it's not a resume about you. It's a resume about your business. It's about the services you offer. You can showcase this. You can send it out to people when you're trying to get clients. It's something that makes you look professional. All it takes is a little bit of time for you to put it together. And it's just, a one-pager basically pitching you and your services and your business. So that is what I would recommend as far as like a visual tool. And it's a really easy way to get started without getting overwhelmed with all the possible marketing that you could do.
This next question comes from Casey, who submitted this question to me through my LinkedIn. And Casey had a question about how do you prep for interviews as an event professional and what information should you be putting on your resume? Casey, I love this question. This is something that I have been really passionate about probably since I graduated from college because I think there's a lot of standard information you can find out there. So just talking about like what to put on your resume. I used to have a very straightforward resume, black and white, and I just felt like it really didn't encapsulate who I was as a professional and didn't when your resume is in a stack of other resumes, it just didn't feel like it encapsulated who I was. So I have some color on my resume and like literally my name is in a different color than the rest of the text. And that just has made me feel better. I haven't had anybody say, wow, I hate this on your resume. But that's been nice just so to play with the formatting. I also have a fun section at the bottom where I include the countries I've traveled to because that's a big value of mine. I love travel and I want people to know that I'm well traveled so that if they want to send me somewhere for an event, they know I'm very comfortable doing it. And I also have an interest section where I list some things that are just I'm interested in or I like. Again, I found those are kind of little seeds for conversation starters and help just kind of help people see me as a holistic being. So, what to put on your resume? This is somewhere that you want to make sure you have a master resume, meaning a resume that includes all of your work history, everything you possibly have worked on. And that is one living document that you constantly update when you can remember to. And then you then would copy that master resume and then you can tweak it based on the different roles you're going for. And like, for example, I have agencies who want my resume, whether I'm interviewing to work with them or they just want it to have it for reference. And so I will tweak my resume to either focus on all of my conference, corporate event experience, or I will tweak my resume to focus on all my sports experience for sports specific jobs. And so that's why the master is so important because you don't want to forget all the work you do because maybe one day you'll pivot and do something different. But the way I organize my resume is I have my own business and I'm freelance. And so that's one big chunk. And I'm currently doing that. So that's my current work experience, kind of right at the top. And I list out probably 5 bullets or so of what I do. And then I have highlights, I called them. So they're called highlights. And I think I have 3 bullets below that are specific examples of things I'm proud of that I've worked on. And with that, I like to put specific numbers. So maybe not as specific as 6,102, but maybe I'll just say, over 6,000 attendees at this general session that I produced or something like that. But putting numbers to it has a little bit more impact than just saying I produced a general session. So the highlights, and that's something I can change. And I have evolved. I've been in business now for 7.5 years. And so I've evolved what I'm proud of, what I'm focusing on. So that's a fun section. And then I do break out some of my sports experiences while they all happen while I'm freelance. I've found that that's helpful visually for people to see like my US Open experience, my Olympic experience, all these things broken out as separate jobs. And I put and I say contract and I put the date, the month and the year that I did those. So that's really helpful. The way I kind of delineate between what goes on my resume and what goes on my LinkedIn, a lot of it should match, but I find my resume, I'm able to be a little more transparent about some of the projects I've worked on because that's just getting shown to a recruiter. It's getting circulated internally, whereas I might be a little bit more general or vague on things that are on my LinkedIn. So that's kind of how I delineate between the two. Most people are going to tell you to keep it one page. I think that's a great tip. I don't remember where I'd heard, but once you were kind of 5, 6 years out of college, it's okay to have up to 2 pages, but not to have more than that. And that's what I pretty much stuck to is I have a master resume that might be like 3.5 pages long at this point with all the different things, dating back to like my high school jobs I had, just because I want them for reference to have if I ever need to look back at that. But I keep a 2-pager is really what I've been circulating for any of my other jobs that I've been at. Prepping for interviews, we probably could do a whole episode on. So all I would say is come prepared with some stories and some examples from events that you've worked, events you've attended, events you've volunteered at. They're always going to get asked probably about how you de-escalated a situation or solved a problem or overcame a challenge. So making sure you have something like that. And then I always love to have a story or two in my back pocket for an event that is similar to the one or the role that I'm going to be interviewing for. whether it's something that surprised you, something you're proud of. Just be prepared with that. Because in the event industry, there's no way to like certify a lot of what we do. And so really those anecdotes and those stories are going to be your ticket.
All right. The next question that I will answer is about the process of pitching to vendors for business collaborations. I love this question. I love the idea. This is, community over competition. The idea that we preach all the time on here, it's collaboration. And so as you pitch vendors for business collaborations, I think you will automatically see the people who are on board with this idea of partnership and the people that are not. It'll be very clear to you if this person seems like a partner or does not. And that doesn't fault them. They just do business a little bit differently. So if you are looking for pitching vendors for business collaborations, a great place to start is with venues and an event professional that does like something different than you do. So, for example, I do fundraising events. I love partnering with wedding planners because I don't do weddings, so I can refer weddings to them. And I hope that that wedding planner would refer fundraising events to me. And so that is a very easy referral partnership right off the bat. You just want to find somebody whose business you enjoy, like that you will refer to. And so you can look for that. And then another thing, let's say you're an event planner, I'm just assuming, and you are trying to get in with venues. This is something that me and my team have been working on lately is we are realizing how many venues, especially some of the smaller ones, they have a preferred vendor list, but planners are not on that list for one reason or another. And so we've started to pitch them like, can you add us to that list? We have worked with you, we get it, and we love working with you. So even if we've only worked with them once, like we still are asking and making that request. And in most times they're like, oh yeah, let's get you on there. We don't have anybody. We should definitely be doing that. We have a, catering preferred list. We have florist lists. So we have DJ lists, but we don't have a planner list. What's up with that? And they've said that time and time again, which is pretty interesting. So if you want to start pitching to vendors for business collaborations, venues might be a great place to start because they are a wonderful hub of vendors. So hopefully that helps. All right. The last question that I will answer today is how to handle rejection when a client is not interested. What can we offer them to stay in consideration for the future? This is a hard one. Rejection is is just challenging sometimes. You always want to know like why. But if a client's not interested and you still want to stay in consideration, I think that there are a number of things that you can do. I want to caveat this by saying I'm not like a hard seller. And so, but I also have no problem asking someone anything because they just might say no and that's it. Like, it's no big deal if people say no. So if they've already said no to you, they've rejected you and your services, there is one way that I do always like to go back to people, depending on what you're pitching them, right? But I will go back and I'll say, I totally understand. No worries. If you find yourself in a place where you just need day of support as you get closer to the event, please keep us in mind. We'd be happy just to come and do day of. Because usually we're pitching them on a bigger package and they may say no. And in that case, I'm like, we're happy just to show up and do day of. And we are. That's one of the services that we offer. We can just show up and do day of management. And so sometimes they're like, oh, well, maybe we do have the budget for that. Or they'll come to us. This has happened a few times 2 weeks before their event. And they're like, oh my gosh, we're overwhelmed. We need help. Yes, can you come day of? So it's like a former no that turned into a yes with a different level of service. To me, that's still a win. Like you still have that relationship. Another thing is when someone has told me no, I kind of track them in my project management software and I mark them as like lost. But I always go back to that lost list every year and reach out to them, even though they've said no. And I have had clients who have become yeses because I've reached out. And so I wouldn't discount the people who have said no in the past. And depending on the organizations you're working with, some of them have a lot of turnover. So by the time you reach back out, it's already a new contact anyway. So it's almost like a resell. So I wouldn't be afraid to try again. Like later, obviously, like give it a little bit of space in my opinion. So those are some ideas on how you can stay in consideration for the future. And my last one is something that I want to start implementing that I've been thinking about is that if someone says no, but you know that they're like what their event is and if their event is coming up, to kind of track when that event is happening and maybe reach out, a month and a half, maybe 2 months after the event, like give them some time and say, hey, I just wanted to check in. how did this event go? I hope it was awesome. Like something as simple as that. And you're going to hear from people if they're like, oh my gosh, it was really hard. Like we had a lot of mistakes. Or maybe it was great. And that's awesome that they can handle the event. Kudos, seriously, to them. But in many cases, I suspect, I'm going to try this. I think people will be like, well, yeah, it was a lot of work and I forgot about that. So maybe we can like consider working with you all in the future. I'll report back. This is what I'm going to try. Try it with me. Let's see if it works. And I hope that helps.
So my take on this is how to handle rejection when a client's not interested. I I think this is something that comes with time. When I first started in the event industry, I feel like I handled rejections pretty tough. I wouldn't say that I'm over it now, even 7.5 years in, but I have found that I am not the perfect fit for every single person out there. And so sometimes handling that rejection, I think it's helpful for you to know why you got rejected. Was it maybe the budget? Was it they just had somebody else in mind who already had the relationship? Getting a little bit of clarity on that can kind of help you figure out what it is. But I would also pay attention to your reaction. Like, did you seem relieved? Did you seem really bummed out because you really, really wanted that? And then kind of hone in on that and figuring out, okay, if you really are bummed and you wish you'd had it, like what can you do to make sure you win it next time? Can you get more experience? Can you figure out and talk to different people in that organization for when they look for bids for next year for that event? Um, that's kind of a good gauge for you to kind of figure out. And if you feel relieved when they say no slightly, then it probably wasn't the right fit for you anyway. To stay in consideration for the future, I feel like this is just add them to your list. If they're the one that got away, I would still check in with them every couple months and just pop up in their inbox saying you were thinking of them, or maybe you saw something relevant to their event, and maybe give them a sentence or two of like, here's what I've been up to lately. Hope all is well. That is one that I think can be really helpful. I've had a client or two that I've worked with before, and then the next year they're like, "Oh, I think we can do it on our own." And I always say, great. That's gonna, wish you all the best. If you have any questions about anything, feel free to, email me. I'm happy to answer a one-off question or two, and hope to work with you again in the future. And then I follow what I mentioned before, where I'll just stay in contact with them every couple months, checking in to see if they have any updated event needs. And that is a client that did not bring me in person. I think the event after that, they had me virtual, and then they had a really tough time at their in-person experience, and the virtual part went well, but that was about the only thing. And they all looked around and said, what's different from this year to last is Logan's not on site. And now there's somebody that I'm in conversations with to be on site for this year. So sometimes if you let them get away, try it on their own, they might come back to you, which is a really cool thing to happen. But also sometimes it's just not meant to be, and it's a learning experience, and you get to move on and focus on the next project.
And now I have our bonus tip for today. So, our bonus tip is if you have a team, share your goals with each other. This could be, you have full time employees. This could be a freelance team, a group of contractors, whoever it is that you're working with. Share your goals with each other in a way where you can kind of literally put them somewhere that everyone can see. An example of this that we learned from our fractional CEO, Laura, is that you can use a parking lot of ideas. We do it in our project management software, and everyone can put just ideas in there. It's just a parking lot, a space to like put things that everybody can look at. But specifically, you could put like a goal. And so one of my goals was to like speak 3 times this year at an event. So I can put that in there, and we can all see each other's goals with the intention of helping each other achieve them. And I think that there's a lot of power in your colleagues and in your coworkers and in your team supporting each other in their goals. And so having it visible, I think, is crucial. So that is a tip for your team to share your goals with each other.
Thanks, Mary. That was a great bonus tip. Well, that brings us to the end of our episode this week. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Better Events Pod. You can email us at bettereventspod@gmail.com. And as always, you can connect with Mary and I directly on LinkedIn. We love to hear from you. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back with you again next Wednesday.